Welcome, everybody. I'm joined here by the Apollo Chamber Players with guest violinist Oleg Sulyga and pianist Pavel Gintov, and of course, this time's commission composer Virko Baley. Welcome all. Thank you very much for being here. Matt, a familiar first question for you. How did this commission come about?
So this being the lucky 13th commission of our project, the idea of the whole project, we wanted to explore many different cultures and regions around the world as possible. Virko has Ukrainian heritage, and that just seemed like a really natural fit for the project. So I got connected to him through Art Gottschalk, and we hit it off right away, didn't we, Virko?
Oh, I think so.
Well, Virko, you are in Las Vegas. It's good to see you looking healthy, and thank you for being here. Talk about your heritage. Matt mentioned the Ukrainian aspect, but in fact, where you were born is today in Ukraine, but back in the day was part of Poland. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, but I mean, Americans get a little confused about things like borders and things like ethnicity. Those two things do not correspond. So yes, at that point in time, where I was under Polish regime. Prior to that, prior to World War I, it was part of the Austrian-Habsburg Empire. So I was born very close to that in the town called Radecchio. And then we left in 1944 during the war. My father was in Auschwitz at that time. So we, by that point in time, understood very well that that whole part of the world would be under Soviet dominion. And we did not quite agree with the European liberal left who saw Soviet as this kind of the wave of the future. So we wanted to get away from that and get into either the English or the French or the American zone. My father was released from Auschwitz simply because the Germans were running out of manpower. So they were conscripting boys from 14 to 50 into the army. And they had no manpower to work even farms. And we were lucky, we were sent to a farm. And we just lived there with the family. It was like not part of that household until we saw, and I'll never forget that image, the American troops coming up from the farm on the road, which also we were at that point in East Germany, what became East Germany. But Patton, if you know, General Patton didn't believe in that. He thought that if we went through and got Germany, we would have all of it. And then he was told very quickly by Eisenhower, get the hell out of there. This is not our territory. So at that point, the minute that happened, we started moving again towards the American zone, which we ended up in the end in the American zone.
This piece that you wrote for the Apollo Chamber Players, you titled it Dream Suite No. 5, Voices from the Steppes.
Well, okay.
What are the steppes?
Yeah. The story is like this, that when Matt called me, he thought he wanted something that dealt, because this was, the Crimean story was hot. And so the idea was to create a kind of a zeitgeist motif. And I said, fine, we can do that because the relationship with the Tatars, the Ukrainians have it for a long, long time. And so I was in Lviv at that time, and I met with a cellist, a young cellist from Crimea, who was studying with a good friend of mine, a composer there. And so I asked her about supplying me with some music, because what I found that we had here in the libraries was only the Tatar music that was collected after they were sent to Central Asia by Stalin right after the war. Stalin essentially banned them from Crimea because of collaborating with the Germans. So that was the excuse. And so almost every information that I had musically about the Tatars was collected in the 60s and 70s, which means they were already in Asia Minor, so to speak. Okay. When I was in Lviv, I talked with her, and the next day she gave me a couple of books with music arrangements, all kind of stuff. So I started studying it to find out. I wanted to do a link, one piece based on Tatar motives, which is the first movement, and then one piece based on Ukrainian movement, which is the next to the last, called the Duma. So those two are there. And then I added a section from another piece that I had written for another occasion for the ending, because I wanted, it sort of said a more thrilling ending than the Duma is. The Duma is a more quiet ending and thoughtful ending. And I thought it would be better if the audience felt like they wanted to applaud harder and softer. So it's the answer, because it's in Beethoven's Eroica Symphony. The last movement actually ends before that last big allegro. It's over with. But for theatrical purposes, he had to say, I got to bring it back and make everybody go nuts. So that was the same idea here.
We've used the word dramatic, and I want to ask the musicians, would you agree that this piece is a dramatic piece, Matt?
I mean, I'll start and say it definitely is dramatic. And I think it's dramatic in ways that none of the other commissions in this project are. Maybe somebody else can expound on how you think it's dramatic. What about you, Whitney?
Well, yes, it's definitely dramatic. And I also think that the drama comes not just in conventional, like big wow moments, but also in the moments that are maybe more intimate, more evocative, that sort of music as well. But there's just such contrast in the piece as well. And you can only be successful in performing it too if you take on the characters and just really commit to the drama in whatever form that it takes.
Actually, I think that the rhythmic drama, I think there's a lot of drama in the rhythmic and the change of meters too.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
You agree with that, Matt Belgic?
Yeah, absolutely. A word that comes to mind is like visceral. There's something that's really like gripping about the sound world that Virko creates in this piece. And like you were alluding to in the second movement, the rhythms are just so they were so complex and so driving. A real challenge for the ensemble to play, but the effect when you see the performance is pretty.
Yeah, I'm going to add to
exciting.
that. When I was looking, because of the way the rhythm was, and part of the thing that struck me that I wanted to use a little bit, and was Gershwin's "I Got Rhythm," which is again based to some extent on Fibonacci series ideas. So you have 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. And that kind of the thing I find extremely interesting, because you can, and which is what I think caused some pain in rehearsing it, which is I understand, is that all the parts do not correspond to that. Somebody has the 5, somebody has the 2 plus 3, somebody has 1, 1, 2. All these things are what creates, I think, the rhythmic drama. I would agree with Matt that the drama there is the way the rhythms fight with each other.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things about this piece is that it is written for piano quintet, and I'd like to ask Pavel about the piano part in this piece and its interaction with the strings.
I believe that the main challenge for the musicians is how polyphonic this piece is, because there are so many ideas. Each instrument carries its own idea and they overlap all the time. And the piano usually has multiple ideas at the same time, because as Virko told me back then, he writes for 2 right hands on the piano. So left hand is never merely an accompaniment or some kind of supporting harmony thing. It's always equal to the right hand. So for me, it was really a big challenge. Some places rhythmical and polyphonic together with the other instruments, and you have really know other parts very well to be able to put it all together, because again, there are so many different ideas overlapping all the time. So that's why I find it very challenging.
Oleg, you are Russian, and I wonder if you recognized when you first came across the piece, did you recognize Ukrainian or Russian elements in that music?
Hello all. Thank you for that question. Actually, it's interesting you bring it up. I, believe it or not, I am half Ukrainian and half Russian. And my dad comes from Lvov, Lemberg. And my mom comes from Russia. So there is a mixture. There's a little bit of a dilemma, I would say, a conflict within, maybe. But second to what Virko was saying, just to reinforce that, my grandma on dad's side, living in Lviv, she was born there and she lived most of her life in the same apartment. And without moving, she had 5 different passports, identity documents. She had Austro-Hungarian, she had Polish, she had a temporary German Ausweis during the war, and then she had Soviet, and when she passed away, she was a Ukrainian citizen. And the address never changed. She lived in the same place.
That's it.
Wow. There's your border discrepancies.
Right.
And this whole idea of what is your identity. And I think there are two things to think about. One of them is your cultural identity, and the other one is your political identity.
Right.
And those two things do not necessarily coincide.
I want to ask you about the third movement of this piece, which is titled Kozak Mamai. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Kozak Mamai.
And this is a folkloric figure from Ukrainian folklore?
Oh yeah, he was very important. He came up in basically in the 17th century. He was a Cossack, Zaporozhian Cossacks. Cossack is, again, not quite understand. There are so many different types. But their influence is Turkic because their dress and other things that they pick up were very much from that area. They really started in the steppes, in the Ukrainian, what we call now Ukrainian steppes. So Mamai is Till Eulenspiegel in Ukrainian, that particular mythology. He's a trickster. He goes in and he's an artist. He's a ladies' man. He's a thief. And this is what he is. But he's also a lot of fun. Everybody loves to be with him because he always threw a great party. So my idea was to create a piece in which that element of trickery was there. And I also in there do use a folk motif. Among this rather exuberant metrical things going on, there's a very simple for the ti ta 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 ti, just goes in very calmly, goes in, and around it is all this stuff being thrown around, which is his character. But then he presents himself, I'm just a simple fellow. So that's a character study, a musical character study. And in the end, he gives everybody the finger. So when you come to the end of that piece, the way it ends, it's really basically, up yours. Because that's who he was.
You felt so confident in our abilities to manifest all these different characterizations in the piece for not having composed for Apollo before, or any of us.
Well, I just do that. I think all musicians are basically tricksters, so I don't see that as a problem.
Well, you're pretty much true with that. We have to be actors, right?
Yeah, I think you are able to be that because the history of all artists and all performers were that they were essentially, they dressed like the upper class, but they were treated like the lower class.
I was going to ask the musicians, this is a complex piece. What were your rehearsals like?
This was my second collaboration with Virko. A few years before that, I had the honor and the pleasure to play some of the partita. It really captivated me, and when Matt Dietrich approached me and invited me to join, I had no hesitations and jumped right in, knowing that it would be exciting and challenging project. Little did I know that we had to dig really deep in our pockets for not just the drama, but for our ensemble skills, our math counting skills, our technical abilities. And we thought we put it together, being far apart, just the string players here in Houston and Pavel being in New York, practicing his own 5 different hands at the same time. But then when Virko joined us here in Houston, and I remember that first encounter at Rice, we had to just wipe everything aside. And basically the process started again. It started from scratch with Virko's, with the images that you were creating for us, that you were describing, the stories that you were giving. It was making a completely different experience. And all that hard work that we've done, it paid off, of course. Yeah. But yet it was a new beginning. It was a whole new vocabulary, I would say, that we have learned.
Okay, that's exactly, you do it like that. That's why I said, don't worry about being together. This is not Mozart.
Let me ask Pavel, were you familiar with Virko's work? You are Ukrainian yourself. Had you ever come across Virko's work before? Were you prepared in that respect?
Well, I first met Virko when I was just 12 years old, I believe, back in Ukraine. It was a piano competition, and Virko was a conductor. So I played Beethoven Second Concerto, and Virko was conducting, and I remember that very well. But I didn't really get to play much of his music, and that was, for me, really an introduction to his style, this quintet. And since then, actually, right now I'm working on one of the, I believe, major piece that Virko wrote, and I really love it. It's wonderful, wonderful music. Very complex, just like the quintet. I also played a short piece in between these two, a short miniature for piano, also very complex in many different aspects. So now I think I'm a little bit more familiar with Virko's music, and I really like playing it, really enjoy it.
Well, look, it's great to talk about this Ukrainian music. It's great to celebrate the music of that part of the world, and to celebrate, of course, the great composer Virko Baley. Thank you all very much, and let's enjoy the music.
Thank you.
Thank you, Virko.
Thanks, Virko.
Thank you.